You know I've traveled near and far, see the shining sea. I've seen a lot of places, people that were nice to me. One place that's in my heart, and this is how I feel. I'm talking about my hometown, Fayetteville. She's nestled in the sand hills on a river called Fayetteville. Special to so many who proudly served our country here. She was named for Lafayette and known for cotton mills. I'm talking about my hometown, Fayetteville. My hometown, Fayetteville. I'm so proud to be from here. It don't take long when you're away from home to find out how you feel. It's always good to come home to Fayetteville. Babe Ruth hit his first one, heard around the world. Sherman marched with the Union and burned the arsenal. Old Market House still standing, but stands for freedom's will. I'm talking about my hometown, Fayetteville. My hometown, Fayetteville. I'm so proud to be from here. It don't take long when you're away from home to find out how you feel. It's always good to come home to Fayetteville. My all-American city, Fayetteville. Talking about my hometown, Fayetteville.
Well, good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone who are joining us virtually to our Monday, April 27th, 2020 Fayetteville City Council meeting. At this time, I'd like to officially call this meeting to order. At this time, we will have the invocation. I have a number of clergy on our team, but at this time, we'll go to Councilman and Pastor Larry Wright. Do you mind giving us an invocation, sir? You may be.
Unmute me. Yes. All right, let us pray. Father God, in the precious name of your son, Jesus, we want to thank you, God, for this opportunity for us to come together as a city council. We pray, God, that you would bless the mayor, the council, our staff, our city manager, our attorney, and all that works in the great city of Fayetteville. God, we are in the midst of trying times. And God, these are dark days for not only the city of Fayetteville, but God, the world. We pray, God, that you would protect and keep us all. Strengthen us, God, and give us wisdom and insight and direction as we embark upon this council meeting today. God, that we may make wise decisions, and God, that we might work together as a unit. And God, that we might come up with better and best solutions for the future of this great city. And we pray, oh God, that you would keep us all protected and safe. And we thank you, and we make these prayers in the name of Jesus Christ, our Lord. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Councilmember Wright. At this time, we will have the Pledge of Allegiance. Ask that council members, typically we would stand, but because of the circumstances, can't stand. But if we could, right now, repeat the Pledge of Allegiance in unison. And on the count of three, 3, 2, 1. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Right, council item 4.0, the announcements and recognition period. We are joined by Mr. Scott Bullard, the Emergency Management Coordinator, who will give us a briefing on the latest for COVID in our city and in Cumberland County. Mr. Bullard, how are you, sir?
Very good, Mayor. How's the audio?
Perfect.
Good evening, Council, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and everyone listening to the sound of my voice on this beautiful 27th day of April. We are 43 days under a state of emergency here in the city of Fayetteville. From a state perspective, we have 9,142 confirmed cases of the COVID-19 virus with 306 fatalities across 95 counties in the state. Locally, that's 227 positive cases and 7 deaths current as of this evening about 6 o'clock when all of that was reconciled together. I guess I should touch back on the end of last week with the governor extending his stay-at-home order, which has led to a lot of planning we've been trying to do, at least over the last day or so in the weekend. The dates are really hard to wrap your arms around and to be real specific. He has 3 phases with a series of weeks that might extend maybe to the extent of 9 to 11 weeks by our count. But it's really hard to know when to start and stop it until we see some of the metrics that were described, which we know, point of fact, that we're just not there where the downward trajectory favors the different categories. This is really nothing new. We know that we need more testing, and there'll have to be some tracing capacity built and more PPE. And we know, and it's nothing new to council about the shortages and the conservation measures we're making. And some of this is literally on the public health department as far as staffing and resources that have to be bolstered. But this is still very much a team effort. The health system, Cape Fear Valley, is still doing a great job, and we're still working together trying to make some sort of collaborative effort towards where we're going, whether it's completely a new normal or what life is going to look like in the next weeks and months to come. We even did a little bit of looking at case values around the different border counties that border us in terms of what their rates are per capita and so forth. And we're all running pretty even. I know Bladen has not been impacted so much, and Hoke, Bladen, and Sampson have not had any deaths, but part of that is a bit of testing and tracking, and part of it is just the overall numbers as they bear out. And with the numbers being said, please realize, and please make your constituents aware that the more we test, the more we're going to find cases of this, so don't be too alarmed. Dr. Green has put out multiple times the metrics they're looking for as far as more robust testing and the different percentages of how many patients are actually hospitalized and the comparisons between that and the values they have versus positive tests, which we know will go up. One other thing that I think is important from last week, we heard mentioned in the governor's remarks that there might be some local government assistance in his plan to the tune of $300 million. That's on our radar. We're just waiting for more details. I know it was mentioned that would be a per capita population distribution. And so our ears are open, waiting to see what the legislature is going to do when they bang the gavel and start up tomorrow at noon. The final thing I'll leave you with, and this is something we added to the city web page, and I would encourage you and anybody that you talk to take just a moment and look at the COVID-19 parent and caregiver guide that DHHS and the Prevention of Child Abuse North Carolina group put up for us to take and put on our website. this document really goes a long way in helping people understand, exploring their own feelings and how they would tell children or just others, peers, in fact, what they're feeling through this time, some strategies that they can maybe take care of one another, especially if they're feeling overwhelmed or feeling grief. And it has some wonderful connections and links in there if some people want to explore getting some help for a problem they're having. And also it has some wonderful ideas for children and just some ideas about occupying your time. Because I said we've got 11 more days of the stay-at-home order, and we're not sure how that's going to go at the end of that period. I'll pause there, and I'll be subject to your questions.
All right, Mr. Bullock, we did have Councilmember Hare. Councilmember Hare, hold 1 second. We're getting your audio.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Thank you again, Mr. Bullock, for your report. Let me ask you this. As I read through and hear through the news, I hear a lot of cities and states, especially to the north of us, talking about meeting a curve or kind of balancing out a little bit, maybe the numbers somewhat slowing down. Where are we in there? If you can give us a diagnosis.
Again, I don't want to speak too much for the county public health folks, but I can say, and I can offer you what they have given me to pass along, that we're seeing some flattening of the curve you've heard mentioned. However, they're looking for a downward trajectory in some of these numbers, and it's just not there yet. It will come with testing, but it's just not quite there. And I think they showed a graphic tonight on the world news that there are about 31 states right now in the union that at least the U.S. Public Health Service and CDC are watching, because they're just technically not at that right spot yet.
Okay.
And we don't want to have a major reinfection.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Okay. Thank you so much. Thanks, Mayor.
Yes, sir. Councilman Wright?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The question that I have is regarding to testing. And I know you may not be able, but maybe you have some information as far as when a person come down with symptoms and they go to the hospital, are the hospital taking people in? Or are they testing them at the hospital? And the next question would be, how are we with the number of test kits? Do we have sufficient kits to be tested? Because I hear that that's the problem with pretty much understanding the spread of the virus, that we have the capability of testing, and that way we know where we are.
Yes, sir. My understanding is, and this is something we've discussed before, there are kind of two prongs to the problem. There was a kit collection piece, if you will, and a throughput of the actual laboratory. As each day passes, both of those prongs improve. The health center, Cape Fear Valley Medical Center, they can test. Just like now some of the private laboratories, LabCorp, Quest, and others are coming online and they're testing. So we're going to see it get better. If I had one thing to offer tonight for people to take away and for you elected officials to pass on, patience is the word of the day. Patience is going to be necessary as we meet the coming weeks and months.
Okay. Yes, sir. Mr. Mayor, can I still be heard?
Yes, sir. You've got the floor.
Yes, sir. So the follow-up on that is patience is a virtue. This time, you know, we have a lot of talk about reopening and, you know, gradually opening. Where are we with when we talk about the peak, and they're talking about if, you know, we go back to kind of opening up restaurants and things of that nature, we have the risk of the numbers peaking again. Where are we with that reality at this point, as far as you know, opening up gradually? How do you feel about that?
Again, I can't make the call that public health, when they actually declare that particular point in time that is, in quotations, the peak. But what I would say to that is this collection of data, more testing, will reveal that to us in time. As far as reopening, one of the things that we're critically careful about is we want people to understand, if a limited reopening occurs, let's say in a sit-down restaurant, the social distancing is going to be with us a while. We may only be able to fill 25% of the dining room initially. There won't be a full dining room. So this is kind of a crawl, walk, run situation that we're going to see for months, if that answers your question.
Yeah, that answers my question. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir. Councilwoman Ingram?
Thank you. Mr. Bullard, as we move forward with testing, I know that a lot of our essential businesses, they are being kind of over-inundated with a lot of citizens' requests and needs, and just like the stores and here at the city, our essential employees still have to work. Would you recommend the city test our employees, our essential employees?
So far, the stance on testing, if I can address your question in a roundabout way, and this is an area that I'm still very much supporting public health on, is to stand by symptomatic testing. To wholesale test everyone in the city, all 1,800 plus employees, you would be getting a lot of people that are asymptomatic, and that's just not really a good idea, or maybe a good use of the testing supplies that are still kind of in short supply at the moment. So at this point in time, here on the 27th of April, I would say only symptomatic people should still be tested, so we don't overwhelm the system. I'm not really sure what testing everybody would tell us.
Okay, my
because
follow-up
we're
question.
seeing right now, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
We're seeing incredible percentages of people not having symptoms at all that have the virus. The prison system has already borne that out. So since we don't have a cure and treatment is just supportive with fluids, I don't want to cause another problem where there is no problem at the moment, if that makes any sense.
Okay, thank you. You just kind of answered what my follow-up question was going to be. Thank you so much.
Mr. Bullock, thank you so much. I did have a question for you as we're making our rounds with this. And Council, the plan is to reach back out to Dr. Green from Public Health Department to see if she could join us maybe with an update on some of the more technical answers to some of your questions. But Mr. Bullock, we've seen a uptick over the last week in the number of cases, confirmed cases. I think now the latest we're up to 224. I think I saw it today. Has there been some change in the amount of tests being performed, or is it the fact that there are just that many more instances? What has caused that change in the last week or so?
My understanding is we add more and more testing each day. And as I said a few moments ago, the harder we look for it, the more we're going to find of it. And this is going to go on for a considerable period of time until we really characterize where those concentrations of actual infection are and are not at the moment. But this thing is very, very dynamic. It's going to move around. And I don't consider those, which are statistically small numbers, and without the whole data set, I'm not sure what it looks in the grander scheme of things, but I think we have to be cautious not to panic over a few rates of increase here and there. It has to be looked at in the context of the bigger picture. And I think Dr. Green will do a good job of that when she can come back and educate us.
Okay. All right. Well, sir, we certainly appreciate your hard work and effort and your information, and we look forward to talking to you at the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Council item 5.
Mayor Colvin, I had an announcement.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Thank you. So just wanted to kind of remind citizens, hopefully you are out there checking on your neighbors and calling them just to make sure that they are doing well, and those that can't leave the house, you're kind of helping them out here and there. But in the midst of checking on each other and taking care of yourselves, I just wanted to give a reminder that the census is, you still taking responses. You can respond at 2020census.gov, and you can also call in at 844-330-2020 to respond to the census. And also, while you are out, please make sure that you are wearing a mask. Mr. Bullitt has said they are only recommending to test those that are symptomatic. So while you are out, make sure you are wearing a mask. If you must, wear gloves, and use soap to wash your hands. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. All right. Council item 5.0 is the approval of the agenda. Councilwoman Banks, did I see your light?
Yes, sir. Mayor and council, I would like to motion to reconsider the vote for the dismissed charity Rsvp.
So, Councilwoman Banks, that's a motion for approval of the agenda with the reconsideration item added. Madam Clerk, Attorney, is that the process? Is Karen unmuted? All right, Madam Attorney.
I apologize, Mayor. Working on that unmute.
That's all right, we're working on it.
So the process would be a motion to reconsider the vote taken in the dismissed charities, that this is the appropriate place, and you would need a second, followed by a vote. And then council would need to determine where to put that on the agenda, if it's tonight or if it is at some other meeting agenda.
So does that have to be done in 2 steps, or is that a one-step process that you just described?
If I understand you correctly, the motion would be to reconsider the vote. That's a part of your rules for 2-3. So that would be the first part. I guess if I'm understanding you correctly, I guess the motion could include what agenda you want to put it on. Yes, sir. You could do that in one motion. Yes.
Okay.
Sir.
All right. Thank you. All right. So before we go to back to Council Member Banks, Ms. Jensen, did you have something regarding this?
But Mayor,
okay. So I got a motion on the floor. I think that that's what our attorney's about to tell me. So let me finish.
No, Mayor. I think what I was about to make sure is that we allow Councilmember Jensen to recuse herself, as she was not a part of the original consideration and will need to recuse herself on the matter of reconsideration as well. Then also, you don't have, at this point, you don't have a proper motion on the floor because you don't have a second.
Right. So before I go back to her for that, the process for Councilmember Jensen's recusal can come after this motion if it passes. Is that right? Or does
That's
it
correct.
Okay.
That's correct. If you get a second.
Okay. So Councilmember Banks McLaughlin, there's a motion to reconsider the item on the dismissed charity. Is there a second? There's a second by Councilmember Davis. Any discussion on this motion?
You do need to excuse Councilmember Jensen.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that we recuse.
Hold on 1 second, Councilmember Wright. So, Madam Attorney, even though there's an open motion, we don't have to dispose of that before we recuse her, or can we do it now? Because I hadn't taken a vote.
You need to do that because she cannot vote on the proposed motion on the floor.
All right. So procedurally, Madam Clerk, I know this is a mess trying to track this, but so Council, we need to have a motion to excuse Mayor Pro Tem Jensen from this item.
Yeah, yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. I make a motion that we recuse Councilwoman Jensen from voting on this item.
All right. So there's a motion by Councilmember Wright. There's a second by Councilmember Davis, and this is to recuse Mayor Pro Tem Jensen from this reconsideration discussion? All those in favor of the recusal? Show of hands. All right, Madam Clerk, that looks unanimous. All right, so Ms. Jensen, you're recused from this. All right, so there's also a motion on the floor by Councilmember Banks, is seconded by Councilmember Davis for reconsideration of dismissed charity.
And Mayor, just so we're clear, there is no debate on the motion, and the motion does require 3/4 members of the City Council, which would be 8 of the 9 members that are voting this evening.
Okay, thank you. So, according to the attorney's words, Council, there's a motion on the floor by Councilmember Banks McLaughlin, there's a second by Councilmember Davis for reconsideration. No discussion on this motion. All those in favor, show of hands. 2, 3. So, Madam Clerk, let's get names that is voting in favor. So, Councilmember Banks McLaughlin, were you voting for the motion that you made or no? Okay, I can't see. Okay, I couldn't see your right hand. Okay, those voting in favor of her motion were Councilmember Banks McLaughlin, Councilmember Wright, Councilmember Davis, Colvin, and those voting in opposition. Was Dawkins in favor? Councilman Dawkins, I can't see you. You've got a still shot up.
Yes, I hit the raise my hand.
Okay, I'm sorry, sir.
That's all right.
So those voting in favor were Councilmember Banks McLaughlin, Councilmembers Wright, Davis, Colvin, and Dawkins. Those voting in opposition were Councilmembers Waddell, Ingram, Hare, and Kinston. So that did not meet the 2/3 majority threshold, and we move on.
3/4, Mayor.
Okay, all right. We're back to the fractions. Number 8. The number is 8, y'all.
That's correct.
Those who are joining us by Facebook, the city attorney has reminded me that it's 3/4 majority, not a 2/3 majority. So I messed up the fraction. So the number's 8. So we did not get to 8. So thank you, ma'am. All right. Moving on to item 5.0, we will need a motion to approve the agenda.
I make a motion to approve the agenda, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, all right. All right, so there's a motion by Councilmember Wright to approve. There's a second by Councilmember Kinston. Okay, I'm seeing blue lights and red hands, y'all, so work with me. I'll get it. So we have a motion that's properly seconded on the floor. Any discussion on the motion to approve tonight's agenda? All right, all those in favor of approving, show me your physical hands if you can, please. All right, Madam Clerk, I think that is unanimous. That's unanimous. All right, motion carries. Item 6.0 is the consent agenda. Councilwoman Ingram, did you have?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, Mayor Colvin. I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda item with the exception of item 6.02. I'd like to pull that for discussion.
Okay, there's a motion by Councilmember Ingram to approve the consent with the exception of item 6.02. Is there a second? Show me physical hands, y'all. Okay. Councilwoman Waddell is the second. Any discussion on the motion to approve consent with those exceptions? All right, Council, those in favor, show physical hands if you can. Madam Clerk, that is unanimous by those voting. Motion carries. Item 6.02, Councilwoman Ingram.
All right, sorry, hold on, my camera. All right, thank you. So I wanted to pull this item, adoption of resolution conveying 514 Link Street to Fayetteville area Habitat for Humanity for development of single family affordable housing. And myself, along with the B Street community, just wanted to talk about and thank Habitat for Humanity for this partnership and the continued efforts to revitalize this community, and truly thank Habitat for Humanity, and know that the B Street community is very grateful for all the efforts that are happening with their revitalization. And they just wanted to make sure that that gratitude was deeply felt and showed within these efforts. And so, Mayor Colvin, I would like to go ahead. I don't know if I need to vote, but I would like to go ahead and close this discussion.
All right, so Councilwoman Ingram, thank you for that. So that is a motion that you're making to approve this item 6.02?
Yes, sir.
Okay, there's a motion by Councilmember Ingram to approve. There's a second by Councilmember Hare. Any discussion on the motion? Okay. All right, those in favor, show of hands. All right, motion carries. Item 7.0 is the public hearing. Individuals desiring to speak at the public hearing must have signed up to speak with the city clerk by name and address before 7 p.m. 15 minutes will be allowed for each side of the issue at the public hearing. Individual speakers will be limited to 3 minutes each unless by previous arrangement a single spokesperson has been designated, in which case the spokesperson may use the entire time. When the city clerk calls your name, please, you will be acknowledged virtually, and we have to change the language a little bit from what we're accustomed to. You will be acknowledged. We ask that you please state your name and address for the record. Then you may address the city council. And we will keep a timer and let you know at the 30-second mark, we will notify you that you have 30 seconds remaining. At this time, Madam Clerk, staff person will present. So, Mr. Hewitt, who do we have, sir?
Yes, sir. Mrs. Blott is on, and I think she does have a very, very brief presentation. The presentation that was given by Ms. Blott and the consultant at your work session was very detailed, but I will turn it over to Mrs. Blott, and she's available to answer any questions that you have.
Okay, thank you. Welcome, Ms. Blott.
We brought this item to you at the work session in early April. It was a very lengthy presentation about the consolidated plan, the 5-year consolidated plan, our annual action plan, the impediments to fair housing, our NRSA, neighborhood revitalization strategic area, as well as a substantial amendment to the plan. So at this time, we are asking to submit all the items to HUD so that we can gain their approval for the funding that is detailed throughout the action plan. I actually also have Christopher Cawley, the assistant director to the department, to answer additional questions if you have them. Yes, if you could forward that slide, please. And so every 5 years, the city is required to update its consolidated plan. Again, you were given a very thorough overview of the consolidated plan at the work session. Along with that consolidated plan is an annual action plan for that year. The annual action plan must coordinate with the 5-year consolidated plan. As part of the 5-year requirement, we also do an analysis of impediments to fair housing. That was also detailed. And that helped us quite a bit in developing our NRSA, the neighborhood revitalization strategic area, to focus more of our efforts in that neighborhood to assist the folks in the NRSA. And then we had a small substantial amendment with the reallocation of funds for the 19-20 year. Substantial amendment is required to be approved by council prior to submission to HUD. If you could advance one more, please. If you could advance the slide, please. So at this time, we are making a recommendation for a motion to approve the 5-year grant planning documents as presented and direct staff to submit to the Department of Human and Urban Development. A public meeting is also required, or a public hearing, I'm sorry, is also a requirement before submission to HUD for approval.
Okay, hold on one second. We're getting our view. All right. So, Mr. Manager, did I see your blue hand?
No, sir. I wanted to thank Mrs. Blott for that presentation, and she and Mr. Cawley are available for questions. But as you opened up and indicated, this is a public hearing, and we'll turn it back over to you, sir, to conduct the hearing.
All right, thank you. All right, at this time, we'll open the public hearing. Madam Clerk, please acknowledge your first speaker.
Okay. Our first speaker is Miss Cynthia Wilson. Miss Wilson, you should be able to speak now. Hold on. Why is it not letting?
Hello?
Yes, ma'am, we have you.
Okay, wonderful. So, Cynthia Wilson, I am at 228 Summertime Road. Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of the 5-year consolidated plan. I prepared some comments which I'd like to share with you. Economists project that COVID-19 will create an economic recovery period that will last for several years. It is most fitting then to have a public hearing on this plan. The 533-page plan provides extensive, invaluable data on Fayetteville and our residents through the lens of understanding our local economy. What's so neat is that the studies took place a few weeks before the impact of COVID-19, so we therefore have a benchmark of information, a gold mine to assist in analyzing COVID-19 impacts over the next several years. The data goals, I'd like to focus on the employment goal, economic development strategy number 1. I suggest the goal be enhanced to include the word equity. Equity looks at all people, including all people in the recovery, women as well as men, communities of color, handicapped, people over 55, folks in low-income zip codes. I suggest the goal read, we support and encourage equity in hiring, job training, career advancement, and job retention. The consolidated plan has graphs, maps, descriptive material, all that demonstrate a history of inequities that have led to a disproportionate negative impact on low-income communities. Will history repeat itself? We're about to enter a recovery period when some tens of thousands of Fayetteville residents will be seeking to return to work. Who will get jobs? Including the word equity allows us to bend the curve away from a disproportionate negative impact. It allows us to anticipate barriers. For example, through the equity lens, we see the barrier of homes without internet access. How are those folks going to fill out online job applications? How will the job seeker find out about an opening? How will the job seeker participate in the online fairs? How will they get to the starting line? Only by anticipating barriers, overcoming hurdles, can we bend the curve so that recovery reaches all of Fayetteville citizens. Funding linked to the 5-year plan can allow for seeking solutions that lead to overcoming hurdles. Please consider strengthening the employment goal to state, we support and encourage equity in hiring, job training, career advancement, and job retention. Thank you, with 15 seconds to go.
All right, awesome, thank you. Madam Clerk, do we have any other speakers on this item?
We do. We have Rsvp Mohammed Smith. I am looking for him.
The minister.
His name nor phone number are showing up in my list.
Okay. The Honorable Mr. Rsvp, are you on the line, sir?
He won't be able to hear us.
Okay. Okay. But that number that doesn't have a name, maybe.
No, that's not
Okay.
the number. That is the Fayetteville Observer. Caption. I don't have him. I don't see him.
Okay. Mr. Smith, we had you signed up, but we cannot, the clerk is searching for your number, so. No, okay. All right, I think we have it. So with that, we'll close the public hearing on this item. And council, did you have any questions? Ms. Wilson, I did have, well, I guess for Ms. Blott, not Ms. Wilson. Am I unmuted? Am I unmuted? Ms. Blott, Ms. Wilson alluded to this some in her presentation. My understanding, the first part of the CARES Act added roughly about $1 million to Fayetteville's community development block grant funding. Has your 5-year plan taken into consideration the things that will impact your department over the next 5 years because of COVID? I know you've been working on this for some time, but how much consideration did you get for COVID related? Ms. Blott, I think you're muted. Give us 1 second to unmute you.
She's taking away my time.
Okay, there you go. I can hear you.
Okay. All right.
Ms. Blott, I can't hear you. Are you still speaking?
Yes, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So the CDBG funds in this action plan and consolidated plan are our traditional entitlement allocation. We've been given an additional allocation of CDBG-CV to address any issues related to COVID-19. So we actually have to come up with a plan on how we intend to use that $903,000 so that we aren't duplicating efforts and that we are truly addressing the needs of the community as a result of COVID-19. The flexibility is in that, well, we submit this consolidated plan and annual action plan. If we determine that there's greater need, we can change the allocations of our current 5-year consolidated plan and annual action plan to meet the needs of, to meet COVID-19 related needs. So there are two different programs. Our flexibility will lie in if we determine the need is greater than $903,000, we can pull from that CDBG normal entitlement allocation to meet that need.
Okay. Thank you. Councilmember Banks and then Councilmember Wright.
I did have a question. I'm sorry, did we go past 7.02 with the emergency bridge loan?
No, ma'am, we're still at 7.01.
Oh, okay.
Your question was related to 7.01?
Yes, it was related to that.
Okay. Councilmember Wright and then Ingram.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor. Maybe this is for Cindy Blott, but I do have some concerns with the wording, and we're looking at the wordings when you're talking about setting goals. Currently, the goal is stated: we support and encourage new job creation, job retention, and new job training. But I think we need to add in there, equality, because we support and encourage equality in hiring, job training, career advancement, and job retention. So when you talk about equality, you want to make sure that we have a balance of hiring across the board when you're talking about, race, Black, brown folk in our community, now more so than ever with the COVID virus has hit. There's a loss of a lot of jobs out there, and we're not certain whether we'll get those jobs back, and want to make sure that there are fair hiring practices. And sometimes, and I think that as a staff, we work hard to do that, and I've seen them do that through the years, but I'm going to be looking very closely in the future as to how equality and fairness in hiring practices would come out. So I think we may need to put that word equality in there. It acknowledges the disproportionate and the negative treatment that occurs it also it opens the doors to identifying barriers and working with reducing those barriers. And I think that's important. Another thing is the internet services. As we struggle with the COVID virus, the library is not open now, and where people that don't have the ability and don't have internet services or things of that nature or access to Wi-Fi, now those opportunities to fill out applications online with Wi-Fi is limited even the more. So how do we, you know, cut those barriers, and how do we look at it as being able to hire those that are less fortunate, that's trying to get up and that's trying to become more productive in society? So these challenges are facing us during these hard times. What would be the role of the city looking at these barriers like this? And so I think we need to look at that, the CBDG dollars, how we are going to be more effective with that in the future when you're talking about Wi-Fi, and can we do that? And setting goals, I just jotted a few things down. The goals of the Rsvp is to seek organizations who have creative solutions to overcome these barriers. And so I think we need to look at that, and I hear it all the time, and no one likes to really talk about, you know, race, and when it comes to hiring practices and who's going to hit the bulk of this thing, those that are already struggling, those that are in poverty, that are already challenged. This will create a greater challenge. So what is the role of the city when it comes to helping our citizens to get through this COVID-19 challenge as policymakers and as staff? So I just encourage our staff to look at that, and the city council, as we always have been, to be more sensitive and to continue the direction that we're going when it comes to these type of challenges in our community.
Thank you, Councilmember Wright. Councilmember Ingram.
All right, thank you, Mayor. So you both, Mayor and Councilmember Wright, touched briefly on what some of my concerns were. And I know I say it a lot, and I'm going to say it again. When we went to strategic planning, we were told that 900 annually in our community go into poverty. And looking at the impacts of COVID-19, there's no doubt that that number will go up. And so to Cindy Blott, I want to ask, you mentioned about having to look at the true needs when the mayor questioned about how the CARES Act would partner with our consolidated plan, which is also something that we are looking at in our neighborhood revitalization task force, is how that will be partnered with the consolidated plan. But I want to know, when you're saying we want to make sure we're finding needs, can you give me the process, or give this council the process of how you will go about seeing if we are effectively answering the community's needs? Because I do believe before this consolidated plan was kind of completed, we probably didn't have COVID to necessarily that was really happening. So I want to know, moving forward with COVID in mind, how are we, what is the process of really answering our community's needs? And two, will we, once we figure out these needs, will we have to bring this back for amendment and to re-vote on it? So those are my two questions.
Thank you, Councilman Ingram. Ms. Blott?
Mayor and Council, I'm going to actually step in here. I think we're talking over each other a little bit, but I think I can answer some of your questions. This is Chris Colley. I'm the Assistant Director for Economic Community Development. So the first part of your question, Councilmember Ingram, was about, did we develop this plan with COVID in mind? And, you know, obviously that was not on the table through the months and months of working with the community and citizen participation to develop this plan. So as we get down to working with our boots on the ground service partners, those not-for-profits that are out in the community that do all the great work that we're helping to fund here, they may on a day-to-day basis determine where they need to deploy those resources. So I don't want to move on to planning into COVID-19 without saying that HUD has been incredibly flexible with us responding to community needs. And I think our partners are going to be the first line of defense on that. Moving into COVID, the process on that. So we were notified a few weeks ago that we were going to get $903,000, as Cindy said. We don't have a lot of administrative direction yet, but what we will do is it will be an expedited normal process. So we'll put out a request for proposals from our partners in the community. They will submit to us requests. Part of our request for proposals is to ask them how they plan to address the impacts of COVID-19 and the recovery from it. So then we will evaluate those proposals and bring those forward to you all to vote on. I hope that answered everything.
Okay.
Yes, somewhat. My follow-up question would be, and I think this might be for Cindy or Mr. Hewitt or the attorney, as we are moving forward with putting resources to our community, a lot of times what happens is on paper you may make one thing, but in reality you can't make ends meet. And so will the council be able to set the requirements and the standards of these resources that are going out to our community?
So I can answer that. Yes, ma'am. Similar to what we are doing right now, where we had to have a public comment period, we had to get input from the community and input from our stakeholders and our service. We are presenting an action plan, a consolidated plan. We will bring a very similar action plan for CDBG CV, where you will get to see what we, based on our analysis and our partnership with the county, to make sure we're not duplicating any efforts, that the plan we present to you to submit to HUD for approval is in line with what this council determines as spending the CV funds.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Blott, and thank you, Mr. Carley.
Councilman Dawkins.
I must still have my hand raised. I don't mean to.
Yeah, it's on you, sir. Oh, you did not have a question, Councilman Dawkins?
No, sir. No, sir.
Okay. All right, so, Councilman Wright?
Yeah, I just had a follow-up, and this is probably to Cindy. As far as affordable housing going forward, what would be the affordable housing model that we want to really adopt that's the best practice? And I know we're doing some things across the city, but I think that we need more affordable housing spread out equally among our, our areas and districts and things of that nature. So you won't have, low income people all piled in one area, one district, to kind of balance it out, that we could grow together as a city. I think we're talking about, what is the name of that model where it's like a mixed neighborhood, mixed model? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Mixed income and mixed use properties, I believe, are what you're referring to. So with CDBG funds, you are limited on the projects you can do because it must target low to mod income residents. However, one of the new initiatives we are beginning, Choice Neighborhoods Initiative, that we've spoken about, that does target mixed income, mixed use properties. We are in the process of developing that application to HUD. So it's an additional HUD program, but it allows us to focus on some of those things that CDBG will not. For example, it's inclusive of, if you build a community, you need to build the parks, and you've got to have some retail and an educational component. So it's an expanded CDBG program similar to the former Hope 6 program. But yeah, it takes a holistic approach that you can't just fix it one house at a time. You have to fix it an area at a time. So we'll be focusing more our CDBG funds on competitive homes, not just small patches that fix a roof or fix a floor. We'll be bringing homes up to standard, up to code, so that these people can remain in their homes for the rest of their lives.
Oh, okay, that's great. The final question, Mr. Mayor, when we look at food deserts, and I know, you know, this probably is a little expanding into maybe the city manager's purview of like the Murchison Road corridor in places where there's no grocery stores, food deserts, and how we can deal better and make it accessible for all our people. How are we going to be dealing with that? And I know that there's a challenge in the Murchison Road area right now and some other areas where there are food deserts. And can we focus on that in the future, and how can we bring in small businesses or either a large food chain into that area? Are we working to do that, Mr. City Manager?
We're always trying to support business and industry in the community. As you know, Mayor Colvin and other members of council worked very hard with the Walmart Corporation when it was announced that they were leaving. I participated in probably no less than 5 meetings, and the mayor was probably on that many, if not more, as well as trying to find local grocers to come in to replace Walmart when they left the Murchison Road corridor. But one of the things that the council has done has been to make a focus, have a focus on small business and on business development and retention, particularly in our community. And to that end, you had actually set aside money in this year's budget to do revitalization up and down Murchison Road. Ms. Blott, do you have any information on the number of or the dollar value of loans that the city has made or grants that we've made in the Murchison Road corridor to try to strengthen that as a business corridor this year?
Yes, I can tell you that we have done outreach prior to COVID-19, physical outreach, shaking hands, meeting our neighbors on Murchison Road with about 27 businesses. We have funded 3, and there are, I believe, 4 more in the process. We're going to run out of funding though. We're up to $63,000 in funded programs, and of course we have $100,000 for that.
And I also heard as well that the mayor will recall this, that when we were actually looking at trying to find a grocer or someone to go into the old Walmart, or not that old Walmart on Murchison Road, one of the concerns was that Walmart had a long-term lease on and had the building on a lot. I've just been told from our partners at EDC that the building is actually for sale. I don't know what that means for any restrictive covenants or anything like that. But through the work of EDC, the mayor and others, and putting pressure on Walmart to try to do something at that corridor, on that corner rather, it's my hope that we will actually have some action on that fairly soon. But tonight's action, while broadly focused on the wealth and health of our community, was not specifically on the grocery store or the food desert. But that is a good question, as I hope I was able to demonstrate with the input from Mrs. Blott. The council's directive has been clear to try to get money and along the Murchison Road corridor and other underperforming corridors. And so far, I think we've been very successful this year.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. And as we look to, council will need to receive this report, or is this tonight just the public hearing portion?
It's a public hearing, sir, and I didn't know if there were any other speakers before council or questions of council of staff. I
don't think so. And council, just recall that, yeah, we've had a couple rounds of discussion, so we'll move it on. But council, just keep in mind that Councilman Wright, probably particularly to this point, some of this targeted focus that we're doing, even though it may not fit in EDC, because what she said, this was HUD dollars, which have some federal restrictions, but we're also targeting that from the investments perspective with the Opportunity Zone investors and those folks that we've hired to bring resources to that community. So hopefully we can address some of council's concerns broadly, even if it's not in this particular 5-year plan. But tonight is just the first step toward moving this along to turn this in so that we can make sure that we're compliant. And those who have not spoken 2 rounds on this, I see Councilman Mahara who has not. It's your first round. We'll do that, and then we'll have to move on to the next item pretty soon, council. Want to give
Mayor, I getting ready to make a motion to accept the report, to approve the 2024 Community Development Block Grant Report. That's what I was going to do.
Okay. Thank you, Councilman Hare. There's a motion to accept the report. There was a second by Councilmember Wright. Discussion. We've had a couple rounds. Any other discussion on this motion? All right, Council, I'll look to you. Ma'am?
There's actually the 4 different items that we need council to make a recommendation on. If Brooke can bring up that final slide that shows our recommendation.
Okay.
No, not the bridge loan, CDBG.
All right, it is reloading.
All right, go back. All right, my apologies. Okay.
All right, Ms. Block, can you verbally state, all right, so we've got it. So the motion needs to include what, Ms. Block?
Mayor, if I can, I will actually read from the CAM if you can hear me. Okay. So if the motion could be to approve the 2020-2024 Community Development Block Grant, CDBG and Home Investment Partnership Grant, the five-year consolidated plan, also the 2020 to 2021 Annual Action Plan, the impediments to fair housing, and the Neighborhood Revitalization Strategy Area, and Amendment 2019 to 2020 Annual Action Plan as presented.
All right, so.
And Brooke, if you'll go back one slide. It's all of those items.
Sorry, right.
So, Councilman Hare, can you incorporate those things into your motion that was
Yes, sir. Mayor, Council, I would like to make a motion that we approve the 2020-2024 Community Development Block Grant and Home Investment Partnership Grant, the Home 5-Year Consolidation Plan, 2020-21 Annual Action Plan, and implement of the Fair Housing Neighborhood Revitalization Strategic Area and amendment to the 2019-2020 Annual Action Plan.
All right, that's a motion by Councilmember Hare. That was a second by Councilmember Wright, I believe. And Council, we've had discussion on the motion, so as soon as they pull our screen up, I'll look to you for physical hand. Sir?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir?
Just a caveat on those items, because when it looked at the challenges of it, I just wanted to make one statement before we move forward, and that is what's the difference between equality and equal opportunity? With equal opportunity, someone who feels discriminated against can file a complaint with the Human Relations Commission. It is an after action discrimination. This has already taken place. Equality calls for agencies, organizations, individuals to look at historical data in current situations to identify existing potential barriers.
Councilman Wright, were you since you made the second on the motion, that's why I was allowing
Right,
them.
and I wanted to second it, but that's a part of the discussion before the vote. I wanted to get that in prior to the vote.
So, but you did second the motion as stated.
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right, council. So with that, I'll look to you for physical hands for motion to approve or receive this plan. Those in favor? All right, Madam Clerk, that is unanimous. All those voting, motion carries. Item 7.02. Read the rules of the public hearing, which apply to both of these items. So with that, I'll turn over to, I guess, is this Ms. Blott or Mr. Hewitt who's presenting this item?
I think it'll be Mrs. Blott and potentially Mrs. Sabarsky with C. Cindy?
Okay.
Yes, Mayor, members of council, thank you again. I am presenting tonight, and we are required to do as well, a proposal for an emergency bridge loan fund with SEED as the administrator of the fund. A few items about this emergency relief fund. It is in Risk 19. There are a number of limitations with our CDBG program that make the application process and delivery of funds very lengthy. Our partners at the School of Government to see what was potentially possible at the municipal level to assist our business during this whole time. With their guidance and support, we have developed the emergency bridge fund, and essentially the program will give local City of Fayetteville businesses the ability to apply for funding up to $5,000 for loans until they receive their takeout fund or permanent funding from another source. There are limitations on the size of businesses, 20 or fewer. There does have to be a need. They must show that they have been impacted by COVID-19. We did pursue potentially offering grants to businesses, but that actually violates the state's constitution. The emoluments clause does not allow for gifts or grants to for-profit entities. So at this time, I have Susie Rsvp here, who is the Executive Director of SEED and currently administers a multitude of federal programs, of which we, through our CDBG program and through our general fund. Ms. Rsvp, are you available on the line to go about the program?
Mr. Mayor, this is Doug. If I could, before we turn it over to Mrs. Sabarsky as well, I think what Cindy said, and I will allow her to chime in, and the city attorney as well. What's before you tonight is the required public hearing. After the council has the public hearing on the elements that Mrs. Blott kind of outlined in her introduction, there will be opportunities for the council members to make a variety of modifications to it if you choose. I also know that in talking to some of you earlier today, that there may be questions that you have. And so, Mayor, I'm not sure how you'd like to proceed, but if Mrs. Sabarsky or Cindy could give any more additional detailed broad picture, that might be helpful, but it may also be helpful after that to go ahead and open the public hearing to see if there's any public comment, and also then follow up with any questions or concerns that council members might have. But we stand ready to help you any which way you choose.
Yes.
Mr. Manager, my apologies. You are absolutely correct. We are required to do the public hearing.
All right, thank you, Ms. Blott, and I do appreciate you mentioned that, Mr. Manager, because some of these details we do need to take some time as a council and work through the framework of this, because some of this would require a more protracted discussion. So with that, I'll welcome Ms. Susie to kind of give us an overview or her perspective. Absolutely, tonight was dedicated for the citizens to be able to have their input, and then hopefully I'll hear from the committee chair to tell us when we can expect to have this back before us to kind of lay out the all of the criteria for it if the council decides to move forward. So that's kind of how we wanted to frame this tonight. But tonight, as you said, was for the public to speak mainly. So Ms. Susie, how you doing?
I'm well. How are you, Mayor?
Okay, so the floor is yours, ma'am.
So as Cindy discussed, we are in a position to be able to administer this fund through some research with the group of economic, what should I say, frontier runners here in the community. There was a group of us, not only Seed and the Community Development Department, but also Robert from FAEDC, the Chamber, and Cool Spring District, where we evaluated different opportunities from grants to loan programs. And this one was the best option. We tried to combine all the options we thought that the City Council would want to present to the community, as well as what the community needs were through the recent economic development survey that we received. And then we followed the example of what other communities were also doing to set up emergency funds. And in the spirit of the fund, this is the best option that we came forward to present to the council.
Okay. So Ms. Susie, I know that you've been working with our committee, with the chair of this committee, and I'll go to her, Mayor Pro Tem, shortly. What other agencies, local agencies, have been involved with giving input for this program?
The Fayetteville Chamber has been a part, FAEDC has been a part, and also Cool Spring District has also been a part.
All right, Mayor Pro Tem. Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Hare, and then Mayor Pro Tem.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. As I was sort of running through the application here, I see that it's a lot of detailed type information. How resident friendly for those that are going to be fitting this market? How resident or citizen friendly is it versus our regular banking institutions? And there's a lot of detailed information there. Is it a part of Seed that whenever the citizen comes in to apply for the relief loan, that there's someone there that also will help them kind of guide them through the application as far as what goes where, you know, things along that line, because it is a lot of detailed information. Well, spaces to fill out.
One of the things that we're doing right now has been on every Tuesday and Thursday. We've actually been doing a question and answer webinar for folks to help them with the PPP and the EIDL. So this would become a part of that online Zoom program where we would help them and assist them to go through this application as well. Of course, we're following COVID restrictions that we have currently, but that is part of our programming and our assistance that we currently offer through our Women's Business Center programs and the federal funding that we receive from that as well.
Okay, and one specific thing, because I've been talking to several organizations, even one twice today, about trying to help our less fortunate, those that really, really need it, the support. What's some of the big difference between our regular banking institutions versus this one?
Councilman Hare.
Yes, sir.
Before we get too far in that, they reminded me I need to open up the public hearing. So can you save that question for, we'll circle back to you, and some other council members have
yes,
questions. I just want to make sure we open up the public hearing and allow those who've signed up to speak. So at this time, I will open up the public hearing, and Madam Clerk, please call your speakers.
Yes, sir. Our first speaker is Miss Nicole Walcott. And Miss Walcott, you should have access to speak.
Welcome, Ms. Nicole. Hello, Ms. Walcott, are you there?
Hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay. Nicole Walcott, CEO, Shanti Wellness, 311 Hay Street. Mr. Mayor and members of City Council, first, I would like to thank you for thinking of businesses in this unprecedented time. We recognize that due to this once-in-a-lifetime event, the business community needs a once-in-a-lifetime program, and unfortunately, this loan program is far from it. Tonight, I am speaking on behalf of myself and numerous other small business owners, especially service-based businesses. Here are the major concerns we have about this program. The complexity of the application, the amount of necessary documentation, and the required collateral is not in line with the amount of money that is being distributed. This is almost the same amount of paperwork and collateral requirements required for a $50,000 loan from the SBA. Why are we paying an outside vendor, Seed, $10,000 out of the $260,000 in the fund for administration and fees when the city already has an internal loan processing department that can handle this? Where or who does the almost additional $10,000 in interest fees from the remaining $250,000 in loans go to? One of the goals was to provide immediate relief for the businesses to stay open. What about the overwhelming majority of small businesses that were ordered to close their doors, especially service-based businesses? We simply cannot put a haircut or a candle making class on our online stores and sell them. We can't do curbside pickup for massages and facials. These things must be done in person, and we can't legally do that until June 1st. Small businesses are the lifeblood of Fayetteville. Without them, chains and big box stores take over, and you know just as well as I do that they don't have headquarters here. We live here and we serve the community in many ways. We put our blood, sweat, and tears into creating businesses to pass down to our children that stay in Fayetteville. Could you imagine what it would look like if some of our larger businesses that started here either left or went somewhere else? Stell, Riddle Commercial Properties, and H&H Homes, to name a few. It's time that Fayetteville steps up and helps the small businesses in the same way that Raleigh and Mecklenburg do. I don't have enough time, but please look into these programs. For most of you that don't know, this is a $2,500 loan to $5,000 loan at 4% interest that has to be paid back over 1 year with 6 months deferred, but still accruing interest. It has a lengthy application, multiple forms of collateral, and requires almost 20 pieces of supporting documentation. We suggest that instead of loans, the money in the fund be used for matching grants at a dollar-to-dollar ratio with a cap of $5,000. These types of grants are already being administered, and it would make sense to utilize the city staff that's already familiar with the process. If this option is simply not financially viable, then the loan should still be administered by the city, but with a streamlined process, no collateral, and lower interest rates. We all need to be honest with ourselves. This is not like anything that we've experienced before, and recovery is going to be a long and hard road for everyone.
Mr. Cole, thank you so much. That was your timer, but you made some great points. Madam Clerk, can you call your next speaker?
Yes, sir. Our next speaker is Ms. Christine Michaels.
Christine.
Hey, Ms. Michaels.
This is Christine Michaels, Greater Fayetteville Chamber, 159 Maxwell Street. I was privileged to be part of the phone calls leading up to this proposal, and one of the partners doing the Joint Economic Impact Survey that was released. We have been doing webinars. We have launched a resource page for businesses to try to get through this. And what we have been finding through our phone calls and webinars and so forth is that many of our small businesses have applied for the SBA EIDL loans. Some have been approved, some have not heard at all, and almost everyone that I've spoken to has not received a dime yet. So we are reaching a point of crisis, I think, where these funding sources have not materialized quickly enough, as the last speaker said, to help some of our businesses who have already closed. Speaking in support of this program, because I think it's what I would view as a first step of what the city can do with its resources that it has most immediately available, especially like that there are no borrower fees, that there's no prepayment penalty, and that it focuses on businesses of under 50 employees, and it's not just for-profit businesses, but also nonprofits who are especially struggling at this time. To be able to muster this program in 7 days would be very much needed, as well as speedy processing. I do agree on the interest rate provision, but hopefully if other sources of funding can be obtained by these businesses, this loan could be paid off with that, and it can truly serve as a bridge to help our small businesses. So I encourage you to consider this proposal and to also keep an open mind as to other needs that may arise, especially with our very small businesses and those most significantly impacted by closures. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Christine. Madam Clerk, please call your next speaker.
Yes, sir. Our last speaker is Mr. Robert Van Gans.
Mr. Van Gans.
Good evening, Council. Can you hear me all right?
We can hear you, sir. Good evening.
As mentioned earlier, responding to the impacts of COVID-19 on the business community, organically drew together what we like to call the Fayetteville Cumberland Comeback Team. That is your team from the city of Fayetteville, Cumberland County, our organization, FCDC, the Cumberland Community Foundation, SEED, the Cool Spring Downtown District, the Chamber of Commerce, Convention and Visitors Bureau, and SBTDC. And one of the projects that has been mentioned tonight, we did work on, I think Christina mentioned it, Ms. Michaels there, the Economic Impact Survey that went out to businesses large and small in every sector across our community. And of the 250 plus respondents, access to capital during the crisis, especially for the smallest businesses with the shortest track record of operations and with the least resources, access to capital was right at the top of their concerns and needs. I'm uncomfortable speaking for my peers unilaterally, but I think it's safe to say that we all appreciate you considering this. We recognize that the city, like many of our citizens and businesses, is facing tough choices when it comes to finances, and we appreciate all that you and your team are doing to navigate these difficult times. So on behalf of FCDC, we are grateful for the work Ms. Plott, Ms. Rsvp have done to prepare this information for your review, and respectfully ask that you look favorably upon the concept. And as I believe the manager spoke to earlier today, this evening, should you elect to allocate funding tonight, know that we will be here to assist you in every way you deem fit with regards to the final design and implementation. And again, thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Van Gans. Madam Clerk?
We have no further speakers.
All right. So with that, we'll close the public hearing. Councilman Hare, you were on your second half of your question, then I'll go to the other council members.
Well, thank you, Mayor and Council. I was glad to hear the earlier speaker start to speak. That really kind of opened my mind up a little. And I mean, as I looked at this document is so detailed, as if someone is applying for a much larger amount of funding than what's even requested here. And well, at least what the high max is, which is $5,000. And one of my concerns is I'm used to hearing from some of the groups that spoke tonight. I'm used to hearing from them. My question, my question is, how did the network go out on some of our much smaller businesses or other kind of regular routine businesses to find out about what was going on, so that they would come down and be a part of the public hearing tonight, since the big thing was to hear back from the community. We regularly hear from some of the folk that spoke tonight. So I was just wondering about some of those haircut folks, some of those hair salon people, things along that line. That's one of my questions. How did you get the word out to make people aware that tonight, this was taking place tonight, and they could come and give their opinion of this very, very long and in-depth application?
So, Councilmember Hare, I don't know exactly who that question was for, but I guess I'll take a stab at it. And then the manager, from what I understood, I knew that the committee and I knew EDC, and I think some representative of the business like Ms. Michaels with the chamber, Cool Springs, I think they were letting their members know about that the city was kind of working on something possibly. The newspaper did do a story on it. So I think tonight was a public hearing. There was a lot of interest in it, even if we didn't have speakers signed up. I think you have a lot of people who are tuning into it, and the media's giving it some play. But I think it's coming upon us once we get the framework of it to get the word out to make sure it's utilized. I think and Mr. Manager did, I don't think without a council directive, you didn't do any type of, the city didn't do any kind of marketing for this. It was kind of those organizations, is that right? You're muted, sir.
There we go. One of the things I think that they can elaborate on somewhat is that the Fayetteville comeback team, as Mr. Van Giens mentioned it, actually provided surveys. And as you'll recall, we sent surveys out to council with the COVID weekly or daily updates that I would send out as well, asking you to fill out the surveys. Getting the word out for people is exceedingly hard. I think that Mrs. Walcott mentioned it, that many of the business and the issues that folks are having have been because they have been unable to be open. What this bridge loan is tonight in the program, it is not going to address all of the concerns in the community. Right. It is designed as a bridge loan. There are opportunities for adjustments hither and yon, but I would say to folks like Mrs. Habarsky and Mrs. Blott, who have more experience in these areas, and Robert Van Giens, some of the documents that it does appear to be very detailed that are on the required documents checklist. If you're going to the SBA, if you're going to the bank, if you're going to some of the other private lenders, even though the amount may be lower, $5,000 compared to $50,000, I think some of the documents that are being asked of are the same ones. Because one of the things that this loan, bridge loan program is designed to do is to make sure that you help those people who need the help the most as a bridge until they get to something else. But tonight it really is to just say, is this something that kind of the council wants to do based on the feedback that you've received and the questions that you have? And I know there's some other questions that council members have, but in essence, the question was, how do we get the word out? Some of it is that we did the surveys. The chamber talked to their membership. C talked to their business partners. Cool Springs actually talked to all of the members in the downtown. But there are likely people who are unaware tonight. But I think that some of the questions that have been asked and some of the questions that will likely be asked are representative of those people had they been here as well.
All right, thank you, sir. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I wanted to first of all, I want to thank my committee, which was Councilmember Davis and Councilmember Dawkins. And I want to give a little history of, how we got to where we are right now. And for the first speaker, I understand everything that she said and the passion and the, and I'm gonna say scared, that she had in her voice and in her gut, because I was right there with her when I had to close my doors down, and everything she said is on target. We are on uncharted territory, and as this committee was going on, every business person out there, when all this happened, the first thing they said was, you need to sign up for this, you can get this, you can get that. And you got this paperwork and you didn't go, it was so overwhelming of everything that you did. And a lot of people spent a lot of time doing paperwork and the results were not there for them. And especially the small business person. And they are the catalyst of our city. They move our city. My family started out, I'm sounding like Councilmember Dawkins now. My family started and, 1970 as our family business, and we're still going strong and not planning on going anywhere, but we need our city to help us. So when we came up with this, and I do want to say one thing, it is, you know, you look at it, it is a lot that you have to fill out, and I get that. And we are willing to do what we need to do. We just want to make sure that we're getting the money out to our businesses that need it, because they need it now. We are in our 4th, 5th week, and rent is due, bills are due, and they need help. So we were just trying to figure out a way to get the money out on the streets for the small businesses that did not get approved, especially the small businesses, or the small businesses that were working so hard that didn't really have the time or the energy to fill out the paperwork. So going through SEED, all of us were in the mindset that filling out this would be a teaching process too, to help get this money out on the streets so that they could pay their bills. We want small business to succeed. So I'm gonna stop talking for right now. And the last thing that I do want to say is, everybody is correct. Mecklenburg County, Charlotte, Wake County, and Guilford County all have grants. And they got that because they have a population over 500,000 and more. Councilmember Dawkins is our representative for the NLC. They are working very diligently to hopefully that we can get some money brought to our smaller cities. And I want you to know that we are on the front lines trying to make that happen. So the committee has done, you know, we have tried to cross our T's and dot our I's, and I'm going to stop talking for right now and let everybody have their questions. And then if you could come back to me at the end, I'd appreciate it, Mr. Mays.
Yes, ma'am. Councilmember Kinston.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I did have 2 questions that I wanted to bring up on the eligibility for the applicant. It states that they need to have at least 50 full-time and part-time employees, but I did notice actually on the application itself, it didn't have a place for that. Is that something that could be upgraded for that information so that it is readily on the application itself to distinguish how many full-time and part-time employees that they have, and then how many plan to bring back with full-time and part-time employees? That was my first question.
Councilmember Kinston, I think the committee is going to bring this to us. This was just an attachment. So this is a fluid application that can have whatever the council decides to take or add or leave. So any of what you said, I guess the long story short of it, can be added, because the specifics to the program, the council still has to define what those are. Did that help? This was just an attachment for discussion tonight. Mr. Manager, is that correct? No action was taken approving or disapproving anything that was in this CAM, correct?
Tonight was the public hearing. We did add the budget ordinance amendment that would move the money. But if I'm hearing you correctly, Mayor and council members, tonight the opportunity was to approve the execution of the Emergency Bridge Loan Fund, but the council can slow that down. We do have your work session next week.
Well, I don't think the goal on my end, if there was a way to separate it, I think you see a lot of the head nods. I'm able to see everybody. So everybody's like that, and they're kind of sympathetic to it, I think. But the details of the program, I think is where we need to spend some time. So can you separate the two? Can an appropriation be made without necessarily approving what's attached to it? Can you separate those two items, or how does that work?
Yes, sir. What we can do is if there are any additional questions or speakers for the public hearing, and I'm not sure if there are, Madam Clerk, are there any additional speakers?
No more speakers. No, sir.
Okay. So one action, Mayor, you could do would be to close the public hearing, and then we could take additional questions from council, or we could take this, bring this to you on, I guess it's Monday, for your work session for a fuller discussion, if that would please you. And then based upon that, and if council could send any questions that they have in the interim to myself or Assistant City Manager Angel Wright Lanier or Mrs. Blott, we will work to make sure the presentation at that later date answers all of those questions, and we'll be able to kind of walk in greater detail through the program. But tonight was the required public hearing to be able to do a program, and the parameters that staff was recommending have been outlined. But again, that is subject to council direction.
Okay. Councilmember Kinston, did that capture what you had an interest in, or did you have additional?
That did capture it. And then there was one other question where it says that the physical location must be based on in the county. I just want to clarify that. I see a head.
I thought I heard city, but that may have been a typo.
In the eligibility portion, it says in the county, within base within the county. So I just wanted to get some clarity.
Can I clarify that? The funds from the city will be utilized for businesses within the city of Fayetteville city limits. We hope that this program expands and that there are additional funds to help those other businesses outside of the city limits. So this will be a program that other municipalities can contract with city to administer as well.
Okay, but Fayetteville funds will be used for Fayetteville businesses. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Councilmember Kinston, did that address your interest?
It does, but if I could ask someone to just go back and look at the wording on the eligibility line, bullet number 2, please. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Councilman Davis.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, Council. First observation is I definitely agree that the application needs to be streamlined, and that this is a first pass. I definitely agree that this needs to be made in some way simpler for people who are looking to apply, and we've got to decide within limits what that means. Also, I inquired about giving money away for block grants. It is clear to me by our state constitution that I've been told that we can't simply give away city money as grants. So for anybody expecting to think that we're going to be able to give this money away as grants, I've been told that that is illegal. That's why it's a loan program. The next thing is, it's not just a 12-month program. The first 6 months are free. The second 6 months are 4.0%, and you get 36 months at 5.5%. That gives you a monthly repayment of $95 a month at the end of the first 6 months. I do have a question for the city. What capacity, because I knew the council, didn't know that the city had a loan department, had the capacity to facilitate loans, or was in the business of doing loans. Had I known that, then I definitely would have asked, why can't the city do it since it was brought up? I'm interested to figure out what is our loan management capability. I would believe that with the pandemic and everything that we're already stretched, but since a council member, someone brought it up as an issue, or whoever brought it up as a citizen, I would be willing to find it out. I like to find that information out. Other than that, if there's anything I've said in there, I've been on council like 5-6 months as it pertains to loans and not grants, as it pertains to the interest rate for banks. I also learned that the interest rates that we offer cannot be lower than bank interest rates. So I'd like somebody with certification to put these small fires out so that we can come to a consensus and move forward, because there's a lot of stuff going on right now and grinding going on, but we need to get the work done for the people.
Thank you.
And I'm done, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Councilman Dawkins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I appreciate council considering this. This is a very important program. This concerns taxpayer dollars. So whenever we're spending taxpayer dollars, we've got to be very, very careful. We got to dot every I and cross every T. We've got to remember that our economy is a service economy, and mostly it's made up of small businesses that power our economy. They serve Fayetteville, Fort Bragg, and our 6-county regional trading area. They pay lots of property taxes to Fayetteville. This program is investing in them. It's giving them that bridge loan in a very limited way. This, as Council Member Davis said, we cannot make this a grant program. It's against the law. So it has to be a loan program, and we cannot compete with the banks, as Councilmember Davis said. We have to charge above what the banks charge. Mayor Pro Tem Jensen mentioned that I serve on the North Carolina League of Municipalities. And in my board meeting last week via Zoom, Rose Vaughn Williams, our number 2 person, our assistant executive director, changed their forecast for cities. And I don't even know if the cities received the report yet, but made the estimates much, much worse for cities through the next 6 months. The hits are going to be huge, and they said it's not going to be 20%. It's going to be closer to 28 to 30%. So for sales tax revenues down. So I encourage the council to consider this program, and I appreciate it. If the chair, Mayor Pro Tem, does not want to move forward and we want to discuss it further, I'm also fine with that. But I do think it's something we've got to move quickly. A lot of folks are hurting, and this pain is not going to ease up anytime soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilwoman Ingram.
Thank you, Mayor Colvin. I think I mentioned this in the last special meeting that we had, where I felt that the conversation of what these task forces were to discuss we needed to have the conversation first before we talked about moving money, so that we could all be on the same page in terms of how we were going to help our citizens. So I will say it came to as a surprise after I reviewed the agenda and then went back to the agenda. I saw this on here, and I think this might be something for city attorney to respond to. I think I'm having trouble following the process of this, of why it's on this agenda and not our work session, so that we can, as a council, have this conversation about how we are going to help our citizens and the most effective way to help our citizens. I also thought that as a council, we would kind of discuss who the administrator was going to be. And I'm also opening to know if we already have a section within our city that administers loans. Why would we not use them? So thank you, Councilmember Hare and Davis, for speaking to that. And the businesses that I spoke with today, that are within my district, some of their sentiments were, and I'm not saying this goes for all businesses, but some of those sentiments were, we could probably go get a lot of credit with a better percentage than to kind of follow this and not necessarily seeing it as help. And I do understand that this is a bridge loan, and I do understand that our committee worked really hard to pull this together, and I'm grateful for that. But I think my biggest concern with this is I wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable appropriating funds. One, if we need clarity on what we already have within our own city that can administer, and two, what fully can this look like? And to follow up, last week I was on a conference call with YEO, Young Elected Officials, and we talked about innovative ways. And our nation is at a time where we're having to be innovative about how we are going to help our citizens and help each other. And one of the things that we talked about was doing a match, a philanthropic campaign where we could put up some money and then offer a match where companies who are sending their money back to federal government and saying, we will support this municipality to come in and match. So I'm all about the innovation of how we're going to truly help our citizens and not really keep them in the hole moving forward after this.
So if I may answer the question about why not keep it internal with city staff. We currently administer grant programs through the department, business grants, some small loans. We do not have the software for a program of this type. We do not do revolving loan funds of this nature. The city does, however, currently contract with SEED to do that. We give CDBG funds for the assistance, and we also give general funding to allow SEED to administer that, because it would not be cost effective for us to purchase the type of loan programs you would need or have the staff to administer a program of this amount of $250,000. SEED has over $1 million in SBA loan funds that they administer on a regular basis. So for cost-effective reasons, we partner with agencies that already provide the service rather than try and reinvent the wheel and not utilize our funds effectively.
Okay, Ms. Blott, did I hear you just say that we already administer grants but I also heard that with our Constitution, it's illegal? City Attorney, can you clarify?
So we administer CDBG grants and loans. Those are very timely processes. It takes 3 to 4 months to do the CDBG process. We have to do an environmental assessment on every potential grant, every potential loan, has to go through SHPO. Again, it's a lengthy process. We are still encouraging businesses to perhaps potentially take out this loan with one of our grants, but the process is very timely for CDBG programs. So this again would be the bridge component until they get permanent funding elsewhere.
Thank you.
Councilmember Banks, McLaughlin. Oh, I'm sorry. Councilmember Waddell.
Thank you. Are we being asked to make a decision on this tonight, or is this going to come to a work session? Because I, like some of the other council members, thought that this was going to come to a work session. I sent over a list of 12 questions to the council and staff that I would like some clarity on before being asked to make a determination about even whether or not we move forward, and particularly if we move forward, how, because there's just a lot of uncertainty and unclarity behind, you know, this program. For example, one of the questions that I sent over is how many businesses fit the criteria of this loan program as it exists in the city of Fayetteville? Because if we're saying businesses that have 50 employees or less, or 30 employees or less, and we only have the capacity right now to do 50 of these loans, what is the impact of that look like? And how are we quantifying, you know, who is prioritized and who is not? And like I said, I have, 12 different questions that I really would need to, I want to be able to be supportive of making sure that we are making a positive impact where our small businesses are concerned. But I don't want us to be hasty and make a mistake, much like we saw our federal government do, where you have businesses that really are going to stay afloat getting these resources, because these resources, as it's being communicated to us, are for businesses who don't have any other options. And so is this going to come to a work session, or is this where we're working it out? Because if it is, I want to go through my questions and get some answers to them. But if it's not, I'll withhold them until the work session.
Mayor, we actually did circulate the questions that we received from Mrs. Waddell, and staff is prepared to answer those. But I think a broader view may be beneficial. Tonight was the required public hearing that would be needed for us to establish a loan program, a bridge loan program. We tried to anticipate some of the questions, and if we were hoping that council would give us the authority to move forward with being able to work out the contract with SEED. But given that we have a work session next week, Mayor, I would request that council just refer this matter to the work session on Monday. And we will, but we're happy to answer any questions that the council members have now. As I mentioned, we did get Mrs. Waddell's questions, and I know Mrs. Blott is available to answer those. But the questions and the answers may lead to more. And so if it would please the council, we could move this to the work session on Monday, and we could still take any questions that council have. But this was tonight the required public hearing that was needed in order to establish a program, this program, or any other bridge program like of this nature.
All right. So I think we still had a couple people that needed to speak, including myself. So I'll go to Councilmember Banks, and then we'll see where we go from there. Banks McLaughlin.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor. Well, I didn't actually have a question, but I did want to thank you guys for, I believe that they were trying to attempt to assist some of these small businesses. Though we are needing a little bit more information, I was wanting to go ahead and make a motion that we bring it back to our work session so we can get more information.
All right.
Second.
So, well, still got discussion, so I'll circle back to you, and I've got a couple of speakers in front. So the goal was to get all of our statements out, and then we'll wrap all of that up with some direction to the manager. So thank you, Councilmember Banks. I'll put that down and come back. I've got Mayor Pro Tem who is on the list, and then, but wanted to make a comment on a couple things. So I did read this, and first of all, let me put some context around it. Immediately after COVID-19 hit, we declared a state of emergency. The council started working with staff to respond to this pandemic in Fayetteville. But in addition to the response, the council has broken up into 3 subcommittees or task force or whatever the language of reference, who had concentration on the areas of finding resources for the recovery piece. And so we heard tonight from community development, which was there's a task force that is scouring the federal, state, and other levels of government for resources related to COVID recovery and neighborhood, inner city neighborhood revitalization, things that would fit into the community development's block grant program or not. Things that are touched and people that are touched in areas that are touched with that. Small business was important to this council. This task force spent a lot of good, meaningful time working with some of the other partner agencies to come back with some recovery plans that we're talking about tonight. And then there's one with homelessness and poverty recovery, which I think Councilmember Wright and Councilmember Banks and Kinston are working through that. So that was kind of the context for those who are joining us virtually who may not know how we got here. So these committees have been meeting. The plan all along, and some have said tonight, was to come back during our May 1st work session. It's about 30 days after you formed. I think you all have done a lot of work in a short amount of time. Come back May 1st for us to work the details out and to bring us some of the information that you have so the council can direct how we move forward from there. As it relates to what we're talking about tonight, it's important to me as a business person that we don't allow a program to be built that the people who need it the most don't get anything. That the LA Lakers getting $4 million from the PPP federal program, Roof Chris getting $20 million, Shack getting $10 million. So 300-400 businesses took up most of that money on the federal level. State money was gone within 48 hours, it seemed like, through the Golden Leaf. It was exhausted after a few days. And so the state help for businesses had evaporated. That this program, to me, I think we will work the details out in a work session. I look forward to that. But I'm hoping the council will make this a very easy process. Yes, we need our documentation, but we don't need it to be encumbersome, because if I'm a beautician and I labor and make my money with my hands and I haven't been able to work and to do my craft for a month and a half, I'm in trouble. And I don't have 1099s and Secretary of State documents, a certificate of assumed name certificates, and all of this stuff that companies have who already probably got this PPP money. The other thing I hope we would consider is that if you have qualified for any of those other programs, that you can't apply for this money, that you're not getting a hit on every level. So I think we got a number of details to work out. And council, I kind of like the fact that, to me, the reason I brought up appropriation, we do that all the time with the manager. We appropriate money to go hire an architect. We appropriate money to do something or another. He can't spend the money, or he can't spend over the amount of money until he comes back to us. But what it says is that this money has been set aside for this use. And so I think that sends a strong message to our business community that we are going to invest something in them. We set it aside to be determined by the council as to how it's spent, when it's spent, what the terms are. But that was why I brought up appropriation, because that sends a message to help us on the way for people who really, really, really need it. So I'm hoping that maybe we can get there tonight. Maybe we can't, but I think all of you have, kind of in principle, nodded in one way or another at one time or another. I think this is something sensitive to all of us. but I think it sends a strong message if we come out of here with an appropriation, even if we put tie strings to it to say that the manager can't spend one dime until this happens or that happens, while we work to frame it up. So that's something to consider. I'll go back to those council members who have pressed for second round. I'm hoping that we'll give some direction to get this back to work session or whatever we would like to do with it. But I'd like to thank those members of the community that have stepped up and have helped the task force out. So I'll go to Mayor Pro Tem Jensen and then back to Councilmember Banks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to circle around with some of the things that were being said. And the first thing that caught my attention that I feel that I need to talk about is when Councilmember Ingram said that she had talked to some businesses and that they said that they could go to a bank and get a better interest rate and get more money. And that is so true. But the people that we came into this meeting that we wanted to help first were the people that couldn't go to the bank. And $5,000 is a lot of money to them and is a game changer for them in their business. So, and I'm just going to give an example of that. It could be the guy that is a landscaper and I said it, I've said it publicly. His wife is at home taking care of the kids, invoicing people, and he's out making the living for the family. And he can't go to the bank, or maybe he's maxed out his credit cards. And 5% seems like a lot, a big interest rate to a lot of business owners. But to a small business that is going week to week, 5% is a lot better than the 20% he's paying on his credit card or she is paying on her credit card. So I just want to let everybody know there is a process to this, and we're just trying to hit the low-hanging fruit now for the people that can't go to the bank and have all their 1099s and their W-2s and they have it all together, and they go to the bank and they have a personal banker and say, I need $5,000, and they fill out their paperwork and they've got their money in 2 weeks. The low-hanging fruit right now is the people that can't go to the bank and get the $5,000. And for us to teach them with seed, to show them how to start. The CBDG loans take forever. This was to help them get through. Now, the process, this is just one little bit of this committee, but I am asking, and it's kind of out of the ordinary that the people on the committee do not make the motions. So I was kind of taken back. So I'm kind of going to ask to kindly maybe change the motion that we can, I agree with the mayor that maybe we can appropriate the funds, not do anything with them until we have our work session. So at least when we meet on Wednesday, we know what we have and we can get this money out on the street for these small businesses. And hopefully we can get that moving and then come back again. But we would do nothing without the council's approval. But right now, the people that are not getting the PPP and the INDL are hurting and they need help. And this is our way of helping. So I would ask that the motion be changed. If it can't, we'll call for a vote and we'll go from there.
All right, before we circle back to you, Councilman Banks, Councilmember Banks, McLaughlin.
Can you hear me, Mayor?
Can hear you.
Yes. So you are wanting me to change the motion as far as what going ahead and allowing the rest of the council members to vote for the appropriate funds and then bring information back to the council. Is that what you're asking, Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes, ma'am.
And again, with those fundings, nothing can be done until it come back to the actual council.
That's correct. The appropriations.
Correct. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's right. The council could put strict restrictions that he can't spend it until we get the framework. We voted on the action.
Okay, but now what about if we decide to move forward with the actual, with our loan department, with the economic development?
Whatever the council decides to do, hopefully we'll get there in this next work session when the committee presents it and the council has an opportunity to go through and say, these are the things that we want it to include. It can be administered by this company internally or externally. I think the terms of it is what we're saying can be discussed at the work session.
I'm gonna go ahead and keep my motion.
Okay. All right. So make sure that Councilman Davidson, right before we start hearing motions, did you all have anything to add before we do that?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Unusual times call for unusual circumstances and unusual measures. And I think normally we wouldn't even be considering this had not it be for this COVID pandemic. And my hats are off to the committee that's trying to do something to help small businesses in our community to keep them from going under. You know, when you talk about monies, and a lot of it is taxpayers, it always come around to the questions or the hard decisions as to who gets this money. And I think the number was 258 small businesses that were surveyed. Is that right?
Roughly, yes, sir.
Yeah. Are we looking at, you know, and the question is, you know, how many of those were minority-owned businesses that were surveyed as well? So we, again, won't get into that thing later on after the dust have settled to consider that as well. But I would say that it would be a good program, but getting into the weeds. Is this some of the money, and I'm maybe asking the city manager, is this some of the $900,000 that it was given to us? Where is this money coming from?
No, sir. This would be a fund balance appropriation. It gives you much greater flexibility in how you can use it because it's your own money.
Okay.
So federal money, so it came with attachments. This is city general fund dollars, which we can build the rules around.
Gotcha. So I'm going to support this program because I think it's necessary. But, you know, in the long run, when we look at the 3 committees that you assign, Mr. Mayor, just like the homeless committee, there are funding that we would need, I think, to kind of do some things that we want to do in the community when it comes to the homeless with this pandemic. And I know we've already spent some money, Mr. Mayor, City Manager. I think you sent out some information about how much money was spent on this culvert at this point. Is that coming out of the general fund as well?
Yes, sir. That at the moment is general fund dollars, and we hope that for those funds that our general fund is our response would be reimbursed at some time by the federal government. That's the hope.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right. So, Councilman Davis, something to add before we go to?
Here, before we vote on the motion, and that's already been seconded, I just have a question. So the city already works intimately with SEED on a number of projects that already exist?
Yes, sir. We have a long-standing relationship with SEED.
Okay, number one. Number two, to just a recommendation to everyone for Wednesday when we come to do the work in our work session. If there are any issues that you have that you've identified with the terms of the present proposal, please, and I know you will, please bring them. If it's collateral, because I have personal questions about the collateral and things of that nature also, so that we can clarify, get through it, and kind of get it done. I know that we can cross the hurdles that we have, pull it together, and get it done. I have nothing else, and we can do the motion. That's all.
All right. Did have a couple of follow-ups before we heard that motion. So Councilmember Ingram, was this related to the motion?
No, it's not. I quite don't really understand what the motion is right now anymore, but I did have the question about the appropriation. I will support the appropriation with the understanding that we are not to do anything until, as a council, we'll be able to have this conversation at the work session. But I wanna question if this $250,000 appropriation also includes the $100,000 appropriation for seed, because I think as a council we should probably have that conversation together, because I did see
100,000.
I think I saw in our legislative text that we were paying seed $100,000 to administer.
It was 10,000 what they were proposing, and that would be in a total of 260. That was in addition.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I read too many zeros. Well, good for that. Well, my question still remains. Before we appropriate the money to seed, as a council, I would like us to have the conversation together, as well as at our work session. Like I said, I'm okay with appropriating the funds for the $250,000, but as far as the administrator, I think the council, we need to hold off on that appropriation of that funding.
Okay. All right. Thank you, ma'am. Councilmember Banks, you have a motion on the floor. I need to make sure that we had a second, but you also had your hand up for a question. So I'm trying to work my way back around to your motion. Is this something separate from the motion you have on the floor? I didn't hear you, ma'am. You were muted. I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. No, that was my question. My thing, I just want to make sure that before anything is done, that the council are aware of any changes. That's the main. And make sure, just making sure that as far as the money that's being appropriated, making sure that nothing is being done without council making a decision.
Yes, ma'am. That was, I think, the proposal that was made. But so are you withdrawing your motion to remit all of this back?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Mayor Colvin.
I'll take my motion back.
Okay. All right. So I do have another person ahead of you, Councilmember Ingram. Did you have something related?
Because I had initially seconded, with her taking her motion back, I was going to offer a friendly amendment to her original motion, but
I'll circle back to you. I've got a couple more people who wanted to make statements, and Councilmember Waddell, did you have something related to that specific?
I do, but since the motion is no longer on the table, are we just having general discussion? I mean, my conversation is still about the motion, about its relative, but what are we doing at this point?
Yes, ma'am. So I did have one. I think since she's withdrawn that discussion piece.
So my question is, the $250,000 when the Business Recovery Committee initially met, I remember Ms. Blott indicating that $250,000 could be appropriated out of funding that they already had in the CDBG funds. When she made the presentation, that was a part of the presentation, and I specifically remember that because when I heard that, it gave me more confidence in the execution of this program, because it didn't feel like it had to come from the general fund. So what I'm hearing now, that it will be, the proposal is to appropriate the funding out of our fund balance versus out of the CDBG funding. And if so, why is that? And if that is the case, again, I would ask that whoever makes a motion would allow all of this to come back to council before we make any movement as far as appropriation or anything, because those are some changes. That's some different, that's a big difference. That's a big difference. And so for the purposes of clarity, you know, we got a lot of phone calls, we got a lot of emails, a lot of messages about this particularly today, many of which we were not in a position to answer because we have not had this conversation. And so if we can, and I don't think that, and I think Mayor Colvin, to your point, and Chairwoman Jensen, to your point as well, I believe that everybody has indicated that we all want to see us get there. But in order to make sure that we all get there in a way that we all understand and we all agree to, and there's no uncertainty, no unclarity, no lack of clarity, and we don't have to come back and rehash because we didn't get it. can we bring this to a work session and just talk it through, clean up the details? And because we've already had the public hearing, would we then be able to just move forward? Can we consider that?
All right, thank you, ma'am. Mayor Pro Tem?
Mayor.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I would like to call for the question.
All right.
Well,
So-
Mr. Mayor, just to clarify, at this
There's no
point,
motion.
I don't believe you have a motion on the floor.
That's true.
Well,
we don't.
we
I
don't.
would like to make a motion.
All right, so the motion was withdrawn, so you didn't have to call for questions. So Mayor Pro Tem, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like, I want to thank my committee, which is Councilmember Davis and Councilmember Dawkins, and I would like to have Councilmember Davis, the birthday guy, make our motion tonight and give Councilmember Dawkins the second. And my motion states that what I'm thinking we need to do is get appropriation of the funds. And I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, actually, if you're yielding your time, I did have Councilman Davis down next to speak. So
okay, I will yield my time to Councilmember Davis.
All right, birthday boy, you got the floor.
Unmute. $60,000.
Okay. Councilman Davis, can you start over? You were muted.
Okay. I'd like to make the motion that we appropriate the $260,000 without defining or identifying the agency who will manage it at this point, and that we refine the terms of the documents and the contract at our work session coming up next week. But in the meantime, that we appropriate the $260,000 and then provide clarity to the terms that exist so that we can give this money to the people who need it.
All right, so there's a motion by Councilmember Davis. There's a second by Councilmember Dawkins. Discussion on the motion. We've had extensive, but I do see a blue hand. Councilmember Waddell.
My question was never addressed or answered. My question remains, are we appropriating the funds from our fund balance? And if we're doing that, when was the change made from the original presentation that was made to the committee where it would come out of the CDBG funds to now where it's coming out of our fund balance?
Ms. Mayor, I will ask Ms. Blott this, Ms. Wright-Lanier. But I believe that the original discussion was that the council had appropriated money for the Officer Next Door program, where we were looking to provide grants to have police officers buy houses in our redevelopment area. And as we have not closed on any of those loans or grants yet, I think the thought was that that money, which is in the ECD department, might be used. But I could be wrong about that, but I'll go to Angel or Cindy, who were participating in those conversations that Councilmember Waddell mentioned. I think that's the genesis of what we had talked about.
So it was never federal block grant.
I need to verify with the folks who were in on that meeting, but or it could have been that something that was changed from that. But while we're all here, I would ask Angel or Cindy if they have a recollection of this issue.
Well, right now I got a motion on the floor. I guess that was her question for discussion, but you'll get an answer back to her. But any other discussions on the motion, the Davis Dawkins motion that's on the floor? If not, council, I'll look to you for your hands. Vote, physical hands. All right. Madam Clerk, that is
Mayor Colvin, are we in that motion was the Councilmember Jensen said, Councilman, can you restate your motion, please?
Okay, well, hold on, ma'am. Let me take the motion on the floor. I'll restate that it was a Davis Dawkins motion was to appropriate $260,000 that is not necessarily allocating the $10,000 to a specific agency, but it was appropriating the $260,000, and then the committees will come back as previously scheduled to the main work session for council to put the guidelines around that. I think that was the motion, Councilman Davis?
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. All right, council, discussion phase is over. We'll look to you for your votes on that motion. All right, Madam Clerk, that is those voting in favor: Councilman Wright, Colvin, Jensen, Kinston, Dawkins, Ingram, and Hare and Davis. Those voting in McLaughlin, Banks McLaughlin. Okay, those voting against, Councilmember Waddell. All right, motion carries. So council, look to you for
Mayor Colvin, excuse me for just a moment.
Yes, ma'am.
I can't vote because my question was never answered. Where are you saying that
General
this is
fund.
going to be appropriated from?
General fund.
It was general fund. I think they answered it, but I think you were asking about the genesis of the conversation, which only staff and the committee members knew, because we couldn't answer that. But
No, I was on the call. I was on the call.
well, that motion carried, and so council, look to you for a motion to adjourn. All right. Have a good night.